For the past several years, we have known Poco for providing consumers with fast-performing phones for not a whole lot of money. That sentiment remains true to this day, and the Poco X6 Pro is perhaps one of their best efforts this year to stay true to that sentiment. And to spoil this video a little bit, while I do think this is the best Poco X phone yet, the X lineup wasn't this good during its early years. We remember the Poco X3 Pro that focused on performance by providing an older generation flagship chipset. At that time, it was great because it was the cheapest gaming phone. A year later, the company announced the Poco X4 Pro, a huge departure from a performance-centric device to a mainstream device to capture more audience by focusing on design and cameras. Unfortunately for them, it wasn't received well by tech reviewers, including me, given the downgrade in performance while increasing the price. After another year, Poco X5 Pro was born, a faster but still camera-capable phone that felt like the price finally matched its features. By that point, Poco had a great device that made the X-series popular in the mainstream market. This year, nearing almost 6 months since its debut, the Poco X6 Pro went back to its roots by offering the best performance for the price in the Dimensity 8300 Ultra chipset while keeping respectable camera performance across the board. But for someone who's been reviewing phones for a few years now and has an amateur professional background when it comes to professional cameras, I'm really surprised to see the photo performance of the X6 Pro. And I said that because the X6 Pro's best feature is its performance. Okay, some of you might say that the switch from 108 megapixel to 64 megapixel is a downgrade. Maybe you might be getting slightly less detailed photos in general, but let's be honest here. You and 90% of people who see your posts are going to see your photos on a small screen, and the least of your concerns should be the sharpness. But as far as the details go, the 64 megapixel main camera is more than enough to give you sharp looking photos that are more than enough for social media use. And what's even great is I don't see too much over sharpening, which most phones do to compensate for the lack of resolution, or rather, the lack of a bigger sensor. The colors, on the other hand, are closer to what the colors look like in the real world, meaning they are natural but not overly curated or processed. Those who prefer more contrast in colors will like the look of the X6 Pro's cameras. And although the ultra-wide camera is nowhere near as good as the main camera, their difference is not that far if we're talking about consistency in look. As for the dynamic range, I'm impressed yet again despite the downsides of HDR. Yes, you do get well-exposed images, especially in backlit scenarios, but even if the colors and details suffer a little bit, if you take a look at the photos overall, they don't make the photos look bad at all. I mean, look at this zoom-in photo I took of the morning sun. That's a damn good looking photo straight out of a camera phone. If you haven't noticed yet, I said earlier that the Poco X6 Pro is great in photos. When it comes to videos, I wouldn't say it's not good, it's just not as good. Don't get me wrong, the main camera's capability to shoot up to 4K 30 frames is great, and it looks good for what it is. I am just not a fan of the overprocessing of sharpness and dynamic range. 4K is a lot of resolution for video, so I don't think they need to add more sharpening here. And when it comes to dynamic range, videos tend to wash out the colors when there's a lot of light hitting the camera from different angles. Also, the brightest parts of the videos tend to look soft once that HDR kicks in. Stabilization though is great, so even without a gimbal, you can get smooth looking shots with this phone. For someone who's into videos more than photos, I wish the quality was just a bit better to make it the perfect mid-range phone for my needs, but when you have one of the best performing chipsets at this price point, it makes you think about whether it's worth overlooking that imperfection in camera, because the Poco X6 Pro is one of, if not the fastest phones in its category. At the heart of this phone is the Dimensity 8300 Ultra, and it's a popular choice for gamers who are willing to spend for a budgeted premium mid-range phone. I know it's such a crazy term for a phone, but it feels like that to me due to so many price points of these different devices. But going back to the topic, that chip made the X6 Pro a budget premium mid-range gaming phone as well. I mean, if you're to play any titles on this phone, including the AAA ones, you won't have any problem enjoying them here. The same applies to regular tasks. Everything is a breeze for this phone. This is Android 14 with HyperOS on top, meaning you also get the dynamic lock screen and the new Mi Sense font of Xiaomi. Poco also added the oldie but goodie super wallpaper that we saw first in the Poco F3. And HyperOS, it's still the same MIUI-inspired Android skin completed with ads and pre-installed apps. I think at this point, we just need to accept that since that's how these phones can be priced competitively. And the good thing about it is that it only appears on first-party apps. So if you download a third-party app like a file manager as an alternative, then you won't ever see an ad whenever you open a file manager. There is one thing I noticed using this phone, and it's a very tiny thing, is that for a Dimensity 8300 Ultra device, I expected the same level of fluidity that I experienced with the Poco X4 GT that had a Dimensity 8100. Don't get me wrong again, I have no problems with the performance of the Poco X6 Pro. It's not even lagging or stuttering or anything. It's just that I was amazed with the way Poco optimized the X4 GT. With the X6 Pro, it feels like the quickness of response to my touch input is not as lightning fast as when I used the X4 GT. I'm not saying it's bad, but I just wanted to point that one out. With this level of performance, the Poco X6 Pro is the thinnest out of its line of predecessors. At 8.3mm, even with a yellow faux leather backing, this phone is thin in the hand, which is uncharacteristic for the X-series since this was primarily targeting gamers. By the way, the black and gray colors of this phone are glossy. Only this yellow variant has a non-fingerprint magnet backing, and you would think that the leather on the back would make this less slippery. Well, as soon as you have dry hands, it's almost as slippery as a glass phone too. But regardless of that, I like the build and design of this phone. It's still IP54 rated, and obviously with the thinner build, there's less thermal headroom. Sure, that's normal, but in all honesty, this phone is just warm at best. It may heat up faster than a thicker slab phone, but the performance is still sustained. But as far as the display goes, you're not missing out. Let me lay out the numbers here. 6.67 inches diagonal display, AMOLED, 120Hz, 1200p resolution, Dolby Vision, 1200 nits in high brightness or outdoor mode, and a whopping 1800 nits in HDR. There's Gorilla Glass 5 protection, and the bezels are all around slim. In practice, this is a tall and wide display, so you get the best of both worlds. It makes things easier to see and typing a bit easier. At this point, it's really hard to fault this Poco X6 Pro when you get all that. In addition to the dual speakers that sound loud and clear, an in-display fingerprint scanner that works decently fast and accurate, not to mention that 67-watt charging brick that only requires 45 minutes to go from empty to full. And for the battery, the 5000 mAh did take a bit of a hit with me averaging 6 hours screen time, but it's still not that bad. That's more than enough to last an entire day. So if you buy a Poco X6 Pro today, expect it to last at least 3 years. Notably, it also supports up to 3 years of major software upgrades and 4 years of security patches. The base model comes with 8GB RAM and 256GB storage, which is fine for today's standards. But if you're keeping this for the next few years, I would recommend getting the 12GB 512GB model. That way, you have tons of storage as well as extra RAM for when Android 15, 16, and 17 arrive. By the way, this is using UFS 4.0 storage, which is 2 times faster than UFS 3.1. Sheesh. That's it for this one. Drop a sub or like if you like supporting the channel, and as always, until the next one, stay safe.